How's it going, my friends? Today we are going to talk about how to run the 400. Please apologize for my track. It's a little bit bootleg, but I am not an art major, so my bad. I think we can get the basic idea. Start, finish line, 100 meters in, 200 meters in, 300 meters in. Now before I begin, I would like to just take a moment to give props to, and everyone should thank KB and Chanel. Chanel, I hope I said your name right. I know what it's like when people botch your name. It's very insulting. Like when people put 2 F's at the end of my name when they email me. Hurts my feelings. Don't make that mistake. I just won't respond to your email. But since you guys gave such good New Jack City Pookie references, I promise I'll get this video out this week. So let's talk about how to run the 400. Of course, you can always have your own opinion. If you disagree, by all means, respond below in the blog and we will address the best ways to go. But this is how I tell athletes how to run the 400. And I think once we get to these longer sprint events, having a race plan is crucial. I don't know how you can send a kid in and run a 400 with no race plan. That's just like asking the kid, that's like saying, you know what, why don't you go throw up after this 400? I'm going to have you vomit because I'm not going to give you a race plan. I'll give you a quick example. I was talking to a kid the other day, and a kid who's training overall I'm not even responsible for, but he had no race plan. And so he had a seasonal best at 52.3 and a lifetime best at 52 flat. And we sat down and we talked about how to run the race. He had some big competition coming up this weekend. And just by putting a race plan together and talking about the things I'm going to talk about today, he went from 52.3 seasonal best, immediately hand timed, immediately ran 50.89. At his next meet. So that's what a big deal a good race plan is, and I think that this is a good way to run the 400, particularly for your developmental runners. So let's break it down. First thing we talk about when we run the 400 is that first 5 steps of the race. I always instruct my sprinters to go out as hard as you can for the first 5 steps. I'm a firm believer in the idea that it's easier to maintain pace than it is to try to get it back later, and especially in an event where we're talking very much about conserving energy and all these things. We don't want to have to come back here on the backstretch to try to make up ground, but we'll get to that. So first 5 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm telling athletes to go all out like it's 100. You're not going to get to full speed in 5 steps, I hope, or weight room should probably be something you focus on more than anything else. But this is going to get us into the rhythm, locked into that rhythm and pattern that we want so that we can relax on the backstretch and put ourselves in a good position as opposed to having to grind to catch up or make up a stagger that we've lost, etc. And I know especially it's important to teach this, especially for your developmental sprinters, because kids go into the 400. They're thinking about how much it's going to hurt. You're all anxiety ridden. I know that's how it was for me. So it's really easy to get out real lazy and passive in the beginning of the 400 because you want to try to conserve yourself so you don't die hard at the end of the race. I'll tell you this, and if you've run the 400 enough times, I think you'll agree with me. Even if you get out slow, once you get here, you get to like 250 to 310. Whether you go out slow or you get out at a good clip, it's going to hurt the same. That pain is still going to be there. The end of the race, still going to hurt the same whether you go out and run a slow time or a fast time. But let's be realistic. Running the 400, training for the 400, not fun if you're not successful at it. I hated the 400 till I got good at it. Then all of a sudden I developed appreciation for it. So these first 5 steps are going to be really important. I can tell if an athlete is going after a race and is going to run a good time just by looking at the beginning of their start. So really harp on that, harp on getting your athletes up to speed. So that's the first thing we focus on. From there, I'm concerned about this first 50 meters. I want athletes to get up to pace, get up to race pace, the pace that they're going to sustain at least through the first 200 meters by the 50-meter mark, so halfway around that first turn. So again, if you're doing practice, especially once you get into special prep, competitive type period where you're doing more race modeling and race specific training, we're going to do a lot of work first 5 steps and first 50 meters so they know what it's supposed to feel like and they get locked into that rhythm around here because this is going to set things up. So that first 50 meters is really important that we really focus on athletes being able to get there. So whether you're timing that or any of these things later on in the season. From here, and again, there's kind of a couple ways to look at it, and we'll kind of digress on your options here. And again, a lot of it's just depending on your athletes. I like to have my athletes at 50, from 50 meters to 200, you get into their float. But sometimes, oftentimes, we'll say, let's run the first 100, then get into our float on the backstretch. But the reason why I rarely recommend that you have your sprinters get up to top speed by 50 meters is, right, when you're in lanes, here, and everyone's sort of like, man, I'm terrible at this kind of stuff. Right, you have this stagger, just pretend that you know what I mean here. Right, if you're in lane 2 and you see people on your outside as you're coming around the turn, especially you get to the 100-meter mark and you can see where you are on the stagger, This is a good opportunity for you to get a sense of where you are, because once you cross the 100-meter mark or the start of the 300 hurdles, you're going to be able to see where you are in terms of the stagger. If everyone's crossing that line and you're behind, then you know that they're moving ahead of you, and you're in a position where you don't want to take yourself out of the race. So I'm a big fan of getting this 50 meters up to pace, and then you can position yourself, and if you've gotten out well, you're going to be in good position. You're either going to start making up the stagger on the outside runners or pulling away, which you won't be able to see on the inside runners. But the main thing is, let's say you're in lane 3 on a 6-lane track. If you see 4, 5, and 6 starting to move away from you, well, you've gotten out too slow and you're putting yourself at a disadvantage as you go through. So here at 50 meters, I want people to really be focused on looking about where they are and making sure that they're at least even with the rest of the pack. Once we come through here on the backstretch, this is our float. Not a float like we're doing a fly 30, because you're never getting up to full speed in a 400. If you do, well, good luck finishing, because that's going to be terrible. We'll go back to the vomit thing I talked about before. This whole race here, coming around here, 100 meters on the backstretch, up nice and tall, chin up, chest up, stepping over the knee, driving down, nice and relaxed, big arm action. Here we need to be this is our relaxation point. This is like our safe spot during the 400. This is where we're waiting for the grind to start. That starts roughly around 200 meters. So if you've gotten out well in that first 200 meters, first 5 steps, at pace at 50 meters, understand where you are in the stagger here. So here on this backstretch, if you know you're getting worked, you can pick it up a little bit. If you know you're way out ahead, you can get caught right up in that pattern. But I'd rather see you get stuck in a nice pattern here than have to make up for it. And again, what pace is that? I call it running just on the edge of insanity in a 400. You have to, and that's part of the skill of running a 400. You have to be able to figure out that fine line between not going to finish, going to rig up, and going out too slow and having to try to catch up to 5, 6, 7 people on the last 100 meters. So here in this backstretch, this should be relaxation time, nice and relaxed. Face relaxed, palms in. One thing you want to teach your athletes not to do, because a lot of them do, is start doggy paddling those hands, nice and relaxed. That's the first 200. Now, once we get to the 200 meter mark, this is where I have athletes re-accelerate or reinvest in the race. I base that really just on my own personal experience. I know for myself, and this was especially the case in the indoor 400 because you're doing 2 laps. At the 200 meter mark for me, if you're getting out at a good pace and you're actually trying to win and you have good competition, that's the part where I'm going. I hit that 200 meter mark, and right when I cross that line, I say to myself, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore. And I cannot maintain this pace for another 200 meters. This is going to hurt too much. So the only way to do that is to really dive into your Jedi mind tricks here. And I won't do my Yoda impression yet. Get to the 200 meter mark and reinvest and re-accelerate. Just like I usually say, for 20 meters. Just really re-accelerate at the 200 meter mark, because that's where you start to stave off that deceleration. If you have an inexperienced 400 meter runner or a weak 400 meter runner, or you got like a 100 person that you're moving up to the 4 and you know that they're going to bail out on you. This is where, like when I'm coaching, a lot of times if I can roam, I'm standing right here at the 200 meter mark, because I'm probably getting splits, but also because I'm going to start screaming at people, because they need to hear my voice, that Coach Thomas is going to get on people, because I'm not going to let them break down. Reinvest at the 200 meter mark. That's the crucial part here, so that you don't start slowing down. We've got to focus. There is a point in every 400, and it's a split second. You maybe have a step or 2 where you have to make a choice. You have to make the choice between saying to yourself, not today, and falling off, or making the choice to say, the pain's coming, and give me some more pain, and eating it up. But it's a split second, you have to make it. But if you lose it, if you bail, if you break here, somewhere in this range, usually like 200 to 250, if you break, you're going to be done. And you're not going to be able to get it back, because you're decelerating too fast and your body's breaking down, too much lactic acid buildup, you reach lactic threshold, all that. So you got to dig here. 200 to 300, 310 meters, I always tell athletes to attack that third 100 meters, attack the turn. Because again, you're starting to decelerate and decelerate rapidly. And here's where you can break people. If you have athletes here, like in a 400, you can hear, one thing I always try to pay attention to is you can hear your competition breathing, right? And so you can hear them breathing. If you hear that they're laboring, right, and they start to get the head roll, this thing that starts going back and forth when they get tired, the head comes back, that's for me, that's my sign, that's what I'm going to come after and really shut them down, because they don't want to feel you making a move, or if you start to pull away, you will break people. Same reason why in 4x4s, my kids know that if somebody passes them in a 4x4, they're going to hear it, because you always hold people off in a relay and break them. Someone makes a move on you in a 4x4 the first time and you hold them off, they're going to think twice about doing it again. You hold them off twice, 9 times out of 10 you've broken them, they're not going to pass you. If they try to make a third move on you, I respect their hustle, because that's not easy to do. Run this third 100 like you're running uphill. Really, again, because hopefully if you live in an environment that is conducive to this kind of thing, you've been doing hill work early in the season. So again, when you say run uphill, athletes actually know what that means. But really focus on driving down, starting to over-exaggerate the arm action a little bit because you're tying up, but really work this third 100. If you work this third 100, you're going to be in a better position to stave off that deceleration that comes at the end of the race. And you're also going to be in a position, hopefully, where if you've kept yourself in the race early, you're going to be in a position where you can actually make a move on somebody or open up, or really work to open up and really run for time if you have sprinters that are just better than everybody else and everything is just a sort of a glorified time trial. So work this turn hard, and then 300 meters or so, 310, right? Because here, somewhere along here, right? Generally speaking, I find we'll say 220 to 280. This is where rigor mortis sets in, where you're standing back and you're watching people run the race and you're like, ooh, that was the spot. That's gonna be, somebody get the trash can, because they're coming. So how do you coach the last 100 of a 400? Oh, you don't. You don't coach the last 100 of a 400. You come off that turn, you say to yourself, how is it possible that 100-meter mark is actually, the start-finish line is actually getting farther away than it was at the beginning? That last 100 is truly not very fun. You're running, you're like, I just want to go to sleep and never wake up. Pray. Pray to whatever God you believe in. You don't believe in God? Make something up. The last 100 of the 400, there's really no coaching it. It's just who is the mentally toughest athlete in that race, and also who set themselves up early. But just like drive phase or anything else we talk about, top speed, speed maintenance, speed endurance is all about how you set up your drive phase. Where you're at here, and the position you're in here, and the amount of energy you have left here is really going to be dictated in large part this first 50 meters, even the first 100 meters, because if you get out slow here and you let everyone get away from you, you're going to have to work really hard during a period of time where everyone else is decelerating, and you've lost the opportunity to take advantage of energy that you have here. So you want to get out and be aggressive in a 400, work this third turn, and pray for home. The main thing you have to coach, if anything, with your sprinters when they're running that last 400 is to over-exaggerate the arm action. I tell my athletes to make it as big as possible, right? In your mind, make it ludicrously over-exaggerated. It's not really going to be happening in real life, but because everything is shortening up, because they're tying up, the stride length is going to shorten, stride frequency is going to slow down, range of motion is going to go down. So if we can maintain that and stick with that pattern because we have good arm action, we over-exaggerate that arm action, it's going to feel like we're over-exaggerating, but really it's going to be normal. And then, of course, really focus on stepping over and drive down and trying to get some degree of lift off this last turn. Now, it's going to be difficult to do, but if you athletes start to let that stride length shorten up and they're not getting any knee drive anymore and they're taking little baby steps and running heel to toe, that's when you really start to drop off in time. You can run a great 300, 320, but if you poo the bed that last 80 meters or so, you're going to lose a lot of time that way. And I've seen, obviously, many races lost by people that kind of rigged up hard or lost focus this last bit of the race. So to me, that's the best way to run the 400. The important thing, again, is being aggressive, getting out up to pace early, not too fast, not too slow. But again, this all comes back to how you progress your training phases, right? During the general prep phase, you're going to be focusing on the base building, the hill work, the traditional sort of developing basically the skill of running. You get into special prep phase, that middle 4 or so week chunk of the season where you're trending toward more specific training. Then you're going to start to do a little bit faster stuff, some things that are a little bit more specific, not quite race modeling, but at a faster pace or a faster intensity with some sprint stuff at the end. So that when you get to this point of the season, if you tell your athlete, all right, I want you to go out and, 6 flat for the first 50 or whatever it is, they're actually going to know what that feels like. If you do race modeling at the end of the season before your major championship meet and say your goal is to go, you want your sprinter to go, 24 flat, 26 flat in the 400 to get 50 flat, if they've never done any rhythm running where you're doing even at tempo pace at different intensities, where they actually are in a position to know okay, we're going to go out in 24 flat, to know what that feels like. If you've never done anything that approximates that or teaches them the skills to do that, it's useless to tell them that. It's useless to say, get out to race pace at 50 meters if you're not practicing that early. If you're not working on blocks and drive phase and working in the weight room and teaching them how to run a turn, you can say, get out the first 5 steps, but it's going to be useless for them. If they don't know what step over drive down means, and they don't know what arm action should look like or feel like, that's going to not have any value when you try to get them to do it, because they don't have the skill to go through that range of motion. So of course it's about putting all the different things in place, but of primary importance, get out, first 50 meters, make up the stagger, make sure you want to try to be even or ahead or made up the stagger. My goal always at 200 meters and a 400 was to have made up the stagger on the outside, my outside runners by the time I hit 200 meters. So if I'm in lane 4 and I'm in an 8-lane track, right, 5, 6, 7, 8, I want to be, when I cross the 200 meter mark, right, I don't want them to be at their 200 meter mark yet. I want to be even with them, say on lane 5. I want lane 5 to be next to me or slightly behind me when I cross that line, because I run to win, and you have to expect your athletes to run to win. I'd rather tell my athlete, we're going to try to shoot for first place today and come in second, than shoot for second and come in second, because that's not how you're going to develop champions. So that's how I think you should run the 400. There are, of course, nuances that you could change or disagree with based on the training age of your athlete, the experience of your athlete, the physical strength of your athlete, the competition, the weather, all these things. But generally speaking, if you kind of break it down into these parts and have your athletes focus on that, you're going to be in good shape. But for me, like this segment here, this is the most important part for me from a mental strength standpoint, because somewhere like 200 to like 250 is where athletes break a lot of times. And so when they're young or you're first learning, if you're like a dual meet or something, you can get to the inside of the track. I'm over here yelling and screaming to make sure that they bear down and focus, because mental toughness is really the key a lot of times in the 400. Who wants it the most? So run to win, be aggressive, attack, good technique. That is how you run the 400. So of course, I'm sure people are going to have questions or want to know about what to do in specific situations. And that's why we have it here on the blog. So by all means, leave a reply below and I'll do my best to get back to you. But this is how you very simply run the 400. If you have your sprinters run it like this or something similar to it, I promise you, they will run PRs their next race. Just simply for the fact that they actually have a specific series of progressions that you're going through. And when you start introducing this early in the season, there's actually more of a plan in the 400, so kids just don't feel like they're just running out there crazy, because you're inexperienced. If you have kids that don't have race plans, every time they cross the 200 meter mark, they're going to be at a different split. And I want my athletes to be able to click off times like it's their job if you want your athletes to win titles. So that's how you run the 400. Hope you got some good information out of that, some tips and techniques you can take to practice for your next meet. But again, of course, got any questions, comments, want to disagree? I guess I'll allow that. Post your comments below. Until next time, actually, not till next time, on Monday, if you're a track person, which obviously you are if you're watching this, I got an interesting announcement that I think will be very relevant to your coaching and training and your track experience. So be sure to keep an eye out for my email on Monday. But for now, here's how you run the 400. You got to meet this weekend. You got athletes. Work it in your Friday race plan. You always take your sprinters the day before their dual meet, championship meet. Take them for a track walk. Explain the race plan. Ask them what they're trying to do. Right? You got to get kids involved in their training. They're going to run a lot harder if they feel like they're actually involved in it, as opposed to just kind of out there doing whatever they're told. So that's how you run the 4. Best of luck, those of you that have meets this weekend. And I'll be back on Monday with some more good information.